Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, September 5th, 2025. Today we are going to be talking about the state of Texas, and State Representative James Talarico set to announce that he is running for Senate in the 2026 midterm elections, a highly expected candidate for one race in Texas here. There was flirtation, it seemed, with some of the Democrats from Texas indicating that he might run for governor, he might run for Senate. It seems clear that now Politico reporting that next week, James Talarico is set to make the announcement that he is in fact running for Senate in the 2026 cycle. Now, Talarico entering into this race is arguably a very big get for the Democratic Party. I think there are very few people that we have seen in recent Democratic politics that are very good in terms of moderating their approach, being very standard and clear in their moral authority as to how they approach politics, and also perform well online. I think that what we have seen just generally in the past few years is this very big urge to bring back in Democrats and run Democrats that seem like they are able to win over a lot of middle of America. And I think in a state like Texas, that is of the utmost importance. Because in a state like Texas, from what we have learned covering it since 2017, we talked about Beto O'Rourke back then. We talked about Biden's odds at it in 2020. We talked about Beto O'Rourke's rerun in 22. And then we talked about it in 2024 when Vice President Harris went down to Houston, Texas, and did a star-studded rally in the state. We have been talking a lot about Texas, and a lot of it is largely revolved around not who the Democrats will nominate, but who instead the Republicans would for 2026. And both of them matter a lot. We've been talking because Republicans have one candidate in specific, Attorney General Ken Paxton, who I believe is the only Republican that could F up this Senate race for the GOP. John Cornyn, the incumbent Republican senator right now, is neck and neck in polling with Ken Paxton, sometimes losing, sometimes winning in the data. There's no clear advantage for either candidate. The point is that primary is ultra competitive. If it's John Cornyn, the race starts out as likely Republican. If it's Ken Paxton and someone like James Talarico, well, that race gets a lot closer. Thinking about Talarico, though, focusing back on, why this is something that I think is good for the Democratic Party, is because the list of candidates right now on the Democratic side are pretty, truncated down to Colin Allred as the mainstream candidate who has declared, and a lot of anticipation that it's going to be Joaquin Castro and Beto O'Rourke in the race as well. But now with James Talarico in it, throws a huge curveball. Because Colin Allred and Beto O'Rourke and Joaquin Castro have done something together that they share in common that Talarico does not. And that has served in Washington, D.C. as a member of Congress from Texas. And in some cases, that can in fact be a negative. I think the problem of the last cycle, and Colin Allred, don't get me wrong, absolutely impressive that he was outpacing Kamala Harris to the degree that he did, but the association with the national Democratic brand wasn't great for the Democratic Party in Texas. It wasn't great to see, the same ads, and I'm sure they will be ripped against Talarico should he win the nomination. But to the degree they would land as well, certainly not the same way. I also think, too, given that, oftentimes voters don't love rerun candidates. That's why Donald Trump made history by being one of them, because it is very rare, even in congressional politics, unless you're in a district that is decided by 1 or 2 points and you are, native to a district of 700,000 people versus a state, of 10, 20 million, right? A very different set of circumstances. But again, getting back to this point of Talarico is fresh blood. He's young, he's ambitious, he clearly knows how to talk to voters in a way that they want to be talked to, and I think that is a very big deal. And I'm not just saying that because Joe Rogan said he should run for president. I seriously implore you to listen to a lot of the ways that he's done his politics, especially in Texas. And as much as he is a state representative, this is something that I think does in fact translate to the type of Democrat that could make Texas competitive, just like Beto O'Rourke did in 2018. And so thinking about, what this 2026 race and what the 2026 races have started to see is that a lot of prominent Democrats have seemingly moved in the direction of running for Senate, even though the odds don't look amazing. For instance, Sherrod Brown announced that he was running for Senate back in middle of August, making that decision a pretty big deal. Mary Peltola seems to be open with the idea of it. Chuck Schumer is meeting with her, and she hasn't made an announcement or an indication that she's going to run for governor, leaving that speculation that she might run for Senate. And plenty of other Democrats are now being fielded for a number of different races. And in Texas, Talarico is one of them. Thinking about, what 2026 would have to be as well. In order for Democrats to even come close in a state that Donald Trump won in the last cycle by 14 points, it would take the moving of mountains. Democrats are not going to be the favorites in the Texas Senate race, no matter what happens going into this race. It is very difficult to see a reality in which Democrats win Texas, barring having the right Democrat and the right Republican too. Ken Paxton, by far, is the Republican that I think the Democrats want to run against the most, because John Cornyn and Ken Paxton, at the end of the day, are both going to be party line votes. John Cornyn does not deviate from the Donald Trump nominees, from, the more extreme decisions. He was a vote for the big, beautiful bill. These are all things the Democrats look to and say, well, yes, Ken Paxton might be more extreme, but the odds at which of us winning in Texas go up tremendously running against Ken Paxton, and therefore he should be the Republican nominee. And I don't disagree with the logic, because it actually has paid off for Democrats in the past 2 cycles in a multitude of congressional races in a way that it doesn't necessarily on the presidential race. But getting back to Texas, what we saw on that presidential race where Donald Trump was winning, 56% of the vote, is that the coinciding Senate race didn't go as solid to Ted Cruz. That Senate race in 2024, you will find, went to Cruz by just 8.5%. Ted Cruz won 53% of the vote, in contrast to Donald Trump winning over 56% support. And thinking about what we found in terms of actual vote share, let's just go ahead and pop over to look at the state of Texas. 5.9 million voters. Donald Trump won nearly 6.4 million voters. And looking at the numbers for Colin Allred, 5,031,000. Kamala Harris, 4.8 million, right? So you're talking about 200,000 seemingly Trump voters that voted for Allred on the Senate level. Trump's margin, 14 points. Cruz's margin, 8.5. Under a national environment where Donald Trump won by 1.5%, walk with me. If you take that result, 1.5%, let's say Democrats get back to a 2018 style victory, where they win the national popular vote by 8.4%. That is a 9.9% swing. Guess what happens to Texas if you swing the map by 9.9%? Guess what happens to all these Senate races if you do it too? 9.9%. Let's just go ahead and run for it. 9.9, Texas turns blue. Sounds shocking, sounds insane, but the maths. And that's why Democrats look to this and say, as much as Donald Trump did win this state by double digits, and yes, they are still the underdogs. To count them out entirely, I think, would be missing what could be the dark horse race of this election cycle. That with the right combination and with the right Democrat, that Talarico very well could be. You would find yourself in a position where you might be just missing the moment that Democrats might be able to capitalize, especially if Latino voters reverse in terms of their support and how they've been moving on a course in favor of the Republican Party. That could be quite tremendous. And so now with Talarico in the election, I think it's more of a question of, does Talarico stand out enough to actually win this Democratic primary? Well, that is yet to be seen. The NRSC very clearly fielded a poll showing Jasmine Crockett winning that, but she's not going to run for Senate. And obviously that was a ploy to try to boost up the Republicans in the state. Nothing, not at all. And so looking at that, that is something that I think doesn't matter. I think the NRSC absolutely skewed the poll just to say that, Jasmine Crockett, who they very much don't like, right? Tried to draw her out in the redraw, but you can't do it. Did not want her to be, still in the Texas Democratic delegation. But looking at the actual poll from Texas Southern University, these races are certainly within reach. Head-to-head, Beto O'Rourke defeats Colin Allred, but head-to-head against James Talarico is down just 7 points. This is against, the former Senate nominee who has near universal name ID amongst a lot of these voters that pay attention and follow closely Texas politics, and Talarico had not even run for anything statewide yet. The name had just been known by what he has done as a state representative. And now that he's made more national headwind with the, Texas Democrats walkout, building up a media persona, going on to new media, again, the way in which he has laid this foundation is arguably very, very smart. And it's one that I do think is indicative of a campaign that knows and has strong political instincts for the 2026 cycle, and I'd be very interested to see what that eventual margin looks like. Because 2018, I think, gave Democrats a glimmer of what it might be to look like when you run a strong campaign for the Democrats in Texas under a national environment that is conducive to that happening, like 2018 was. And again, looking back to that 2024 to 2026 swing, assuming the national popular vote goes back to where it was for Democrats in 2018, is what you find in this map here is that, you know what? Maybe there could be an opportunity. Even though Texas swung heavily towards Trump, almost every single county here, including and especially the predominantly Hispanic and Latino regions across this state, show that while this might have been and is maintained an impressive showing and feat for Donald Trump, it does not make it impossible for Democrats to counteract it and be able to win in the future. It won't be solid and it won't be a guarantee. If anything, they will maintain underdog status for a long time in the Texas Senate race. But to count it out entirely, I think is misguided. And I think Talarico is the first person that really has jumped into this, that where I would say their odds at victory are not close to zero. And I don't think the same of Allred. But I do think that Talarico stands to be, as a newer name, and as someone who clearly has done a lot to do well in this state as of late, stands to be in a position where he can do well in the Texas Senate race. Winning the primary might be a different question. But fast forward to November of 2026, Talarico against Paxton, I think could be way closer than people expect. Because Paxton has a lot of liabilities that John Cornyn does not. And there's a reason why national Republicans are so desperate to get Ken Paxton out of the race. But he has maintained himself, and he's been planning on running for years since being reelected as Attorney General in 2022. He has been eyeing up Cornyn from the very, very beginning. And Ken Paxton, a huge advocate and a huge person in favor of Donald Trump, also has been able to save off John Cornyn receiving an endorsement from Donald Trump, when I'm sure that John Thune and countless other Republicans on the congressional side are begging him to do so. Because Paxton has shown loyalty to Trump, and Trump is showing it back. And looking at the 2026 race, I do believe that Talarico stands to be probably one of the best Democrats to enter into this race, and it will be very fascinating to see exactly how he does in this election. So, we'll wait for the announcement. We'll wait to see what the response is. Do more Democrats enter in? Do some Democrats drop out? Does this change the dynamics of the race, tenfold? We will see. There's time to assess impact. But in terms of initial reaction, in terms of what we've seen thus far, this is overall a very good get for the Democratic Party that I don't think they were necessarily expecting at this point for the Texas Senate race, but I'm sure is receiving a warm welcome. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.